Hey, what is up, gamers? Last weekend, my wife and I decided to take our date night over to the Pacific Pinball Museum. We had never been here before, but we had heard great things, so we were excited to discover everything that it had inside. Let's go ahead and check it out. Admission was $20, and we were definitely going to get our money's worth. It was really interesting to see that full history of pinball paralleled along other major historical events. Comparing it to organized crime, the Great Depression, and even Prohibition, you can see here that pinball had a very rich and complete history. Call me a nerd, but I love it. Here you can see an assortment of historical photos as well as initial pinball offerings, where you can clearly see how pinball had a wide and far influence on early pop culture in the United States. It was really cool to browse through these early artifacts of pinball to see where pinball got its start, not only in the United States, but had influence all across the world. It was awesome how we were able to see all this rich history before we even started playing any pinball. My wife and I found ourselves continually focused into each part of the exhibit and found ourselves deep diving into the various details of each one of the different things that we were looking at in the museum. But I think it's about time we play some pinball. The first pinball room contained a wide range of different pinball games, all preserved in very good condition. Probably some of the best pinball machines we had ever seen in terms of how clean they were and how well they operated. It was so cool to look at the detail of each one of the machines and also check out the various artwork as well. I personally hadn't gotten a chance to play a lot of these older machines in my life, so it was really cool to check out the various different artwork and design and also be able to actually play them. You know, when you think about museums, you generally think of going to museums and being able to check out exhibits as you walk through them, but this was really cool in the fact that it was interactive. I mean, you could play all these owned and operated machines. We absolutely have to give a shout out to the amount of detail within this museum in just the very first pinball room. The beginning of the museum tour wasn't just really friendly and welcoming, but it also really allowed us to see where pinball originated. And of course, with this being an interactive museum, we definitely had to play the games as well. Here my wife is playing Spotlight, a really fun and interesting take on pinball. It was one of the earlier machines, so it was really cool to see that there were other ways to play pinball other than what you might originally expect based upon pinball games today. This really showed that pinball had a wide and far range when it came to the different ways that you can enjoy and play it. While I found it far too easy to get distracted by the lights and sounds of this first room, I found myself deep diving into each one of the different games to be able to play them, really understand what really brought them to life and made them fun and exciting all on their own. The fact that they were able to preserve this is so cool. From someone who could spend hours on end playing pinball at the laundromat with his mom as a kid, this first room was a great indication of all the rest of the museum had to offer. I will forever be fascinated by dinosaurs, so you know I had to play that one. It was really mind-blowing to understand that these weren't just pinball machines for us to go to a museum and look at, but these were pinball machines that had been preserved for us to be able to go to the museum and actually play. Oh man, and you know we had to play this one. This one just didn't have bright colors, awesome sounds, and as well as awesome game design. It also was one of those pinball machines where you could totally see yourself playing for hours on end, just this one alone, let alone the other 90 plus games that this museum had to offer. Also, a fun fact that my friend growing up actually had a Captain Fantastic pinball machine in their basement, and I definitely played it whenever I had the chance. Can you believe that this is only the first room of the pinball museum? I mean, this pinball museum has so much to offer, not just if you're a pinball aficionado, but also if you just love a good historical tale of how they were able to preserve these fine machines. My wife and I both took turns playing 4 Million BC, the dinosaur-themed pinball game I had highlighted earlier. It wasn't just a great pinball game because of its artistic design, but also because of its smooth operation and mechanisms. But beware, it is definitely a difficult game, but weirdly enough, that level of difficulty just made us want to come back and play it even more. Don't get eliminated! There were so many great pinball games to pick from, the only hard choices that we faced that day were deciding where to spend our time. I found myself quite intrigued by Slugfest, a baseball-themed pinball game where as you hit the ball throughout the entirety of the game, you actually move actual baseball players in the up top interactive part of the machine around the bases as if you were playing a real game of baseball. So cool. Another game which I found myself playing quite a lot of in this first room is Roto Pool. What I thought was really cool about this is it really demonstrated how much the technology and also the intricacy of the games were even alive back 60 years ago. How cool is that? I mean, this game came out in the 50s. My grandparents could have been playing this. All right, time to check out the other rooms of the museum. Let's go. The pointy people room really brought you back to a specific era in pinball history. I absolutely dug and loved the art design of these pinball machines. A room like this within the museum really showed you that pinball games weren't all just about the mechanisms and the playing of the pinball games, but actually also the art that's contained within these games. This museum was really shaping up to offer much more than we ever thought it possibly would. Like I said before, we were definitely going to get our admissions worth and then some. I highly suggest also, if you're able to, definitely make a donation to the Pacific Pinball Museum as well. Even if you don't like pinball or have never even played pinball before in your life, you can really be captivated by not just the design and layout of this museum, but also the interactive gameplay. In fact, funny enough, we quickly started to realize that we had not budgeted enough time to really play as many games as we had liked. But lucky for us, the Pacific Pinball Museum has this great policy where you get a wristband and you can re-enter after leaving if you want to go grab a snack or even a refreshing beverage. It was fascinating to learn that the Pinball Museum really goes further back into the building, opening itself up to different rooms with really awesome games. I absolutely loved this room because there was a wall-sized mural of Captain Fantastic, again the game that I had played as a kid in my friend's basement, and it was just a really cool room to play some of the older games as well as some of the newer games as well. Next time we come, we are definitely going to be staying the entire day. Exploring into the other rooms of the Pinball Museum, you can see that one even contained the various different historical components and parts within the mechanisms of the pinball games. So you can clearly see how they work, and even there's different variations of the pinball games, so you can see how they used to be played back in the day. This wasn't just a tour down memory lane, it was a full-on tour into what originated pinball as such a fun leisurely activity, and to what makes it so fun and engaging today. I really enjoyed this highly detailed and full-on encompassing timeline of pinball history. There was even some pop culture references to the Super Mario game, so you know that was right up my alley. There was also this really cool transparent pinball machine which allowed you to take a look underneath the hood and see how they really operate. It was unfortunately out of order, but that just means we need to come to the museum again to check it out when it's fully operational. I can't tell you how tempted I was to turn off the lights to see it glow. Moving right along in the museum tour, you can see that there's this awesome classical jukebox that had Phil Collins, had other classical hits as well, and of course including Pinball Wizard by The Who, which me and my wife pretty much played on repeat as we were walking through this part of the museum. Could there be any more perfect song to really capture the fun and excitement that you have as you go through this museum? Not sure on that. But what I am 100% sure on is this museum rocked, both figuratively and now literally. Besides for being taken aback by all the awesome pinball games, we also marveled at all the incredible artwork as we went through this museum tour. I know this song must get played on repeat here, but somehow it always felt just right to hear it in the background. Let's go check out the newer pinball games of the museum. This next room contained all the pinball machines from the 80s and beyond, and honestly is one of my favorite rooms, not just because of the awesome songs available on the jukebox, but also because a lot of the machines were all the ones I was accustomed to playing as a kid. There were so many classic and amazing pinball games in here, it was kind of hard to keep track. All the pinball games I was putting on my short list of the games I must play before I leave this fine museum. With a lot of games in this room, you can tell the increases and advances in technology translated to all new variable features within these pinball games. If I thought I could spend a ton of time in that very first room in this museum, I could actually spend way more time here because these are all the games that were a part of my childhood, and it had an absolutely rockin' jukebox full of great 80s and 90s music. In case anybody was wondering, I was definitely the person that kept on putting on all the awesome hits from Collective Soul, Green Day, and of course, The Offspring's smash album from the 90s. Being able to find and then play games like Flash Gordon weren't just a testament to how awesome this pinball museum was, but also really transported you back to a certain part of time. I was even starting to hum the theme song to Flash Gordon as I started to play this game. There were really so many incredible games within this room. Flash Gordon was just one of the many different games I got a chance to play. I also got to play Bobby Orr's Power Play. Now this is a game that definitely transported me back to when the Chicago Blackhawks were great back in the day, and also when they were great when I lived in Chicago when they won the various different Stanley Cups. This really just displayed the incredible crossover potential of pinball games. You could include NHL-themed games, NBA-themed games, or even mythical quests, or even completely fantastic worlds within these pinball machines. Speaking of fantasy worlds, I definitely played Black Knight 2000 for a solid 20 minutes. This game is a lot of fun. It's a little bit more on the difficult side, but once you get going with it, you can't stop but want to keep playing it. Speaking of the 80s and 90s, one of the bands that really helped to define a generation, especially within the heavy rock and metal scenes, was Metallica. My wife and I played this game non-stop for at least 10 minutes, trying to explore the various different features of the game and definitely trying to hit the guy inside with a pinball. And then, of course, speaking of pop culture, one pinball museum would not be complete without a Star Wars pinball game. This game was so much fun to play, and I found myself just wanting to play this game more and more. I honestly could go back to this museum and only play this game for 2 hours straight, probably easily. I would be going through this game trying to play the various different missions just to see what you would see on the screen and all the different colors that would flash as you completed those missions. After a lot of pinball, we started to get a little hungry. An amazing new restaurant in the area was Seron, which we couldn't recommend high enough. We decided to go with the margarita pizza to start things off as our appetizer. Pizza and pinball is a winning combination. And here is my entree, which was rib meat without the bone on a plate of greens and also delicious mashed potatoes. Alright, thank you, Saron, but now it's time to get back to more pinball. One of the games that the Pinball Museum actually introduced me to, which I had never heard of before, was Embryon. It was one of the games I actually thoroughly enjoyed playing because of its wide stance and also the amazing lights and graphics within the game. After checking out a few pinball machines we had never played before, we decided to finish the day off with some of the timeless classics of games we played from our childhood and also games we had learned to love along our museum tour. Apollo 13 was definitely one of those pinball games. Houston, we have an awesome pinball museum. Check out that amazing detail. It just makes me want to keep on playing it more and more. We thoroughly enjoyed this museum so much that we stayed there until it closed. Overall, if you're ever in Alameda, California, we highly recommend taking a tour of the Pacific Pinball Museum. Thanks for watching, and remember, damn, it feels good to be a gamer.